All right, welcome everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us today. I am Dan Horgan. I'm going to be your moderator for today's session. I'm super excited that you all are joining us. So without further ado, I really want to jump into today's session. I am super excited to introduce you today to two amazing friends, partners, artists, creators, passioneers, just like all of you. So I'm going to ask Patricia and Jamal to go ahead and turn on their cameras so that we can introduce. Hey, Yumi. I'm so excited that Yumi is here because we connected Yumi to Patricia last year. So by way of introductions, let me introduce you first to Patricia. Patricia, if you were in Philadelphia with us at last year's Live Más Scholars workshop, you may have had the amazing opportunity to meet Patricia, who was one of our career coaches, mentors, partners from LinkedIn that joined us to share all about her career journey and experiences. And since that workshop, I know I have connected several scholars to Patricia, who has given her time, her experience, her knowledge with several other scholars too outside of Philadelphia. So Patricia, welcome. So excited to have you back and so excited to engage in today's conversation.
Welcome.
And Jamal, I love the energy that Patricia brings, so I can't wait for our conversation today. I also want to give you a big round of applause, ask you to join me in a big round of applause and a welcome for Jamal Collins as well, founder of Creative Kids out of Cleveland, Ohio, a neighbor to my hometown of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And Jamal is somebody, and this goes to the theme of networking. Jamal is somebody who I followed on social media based on some recommendations of people that I am connected to. And I connected with Jamal maybe a year and a half ago now. And Jamal and I had this amazing conversation where we ended it by saying, somehow, some way, we're going to find something to work on together. And I was so excited when this opportunity surfaced because this is an amazing way for Jamal's story to be shared and for you all to be inspired by the amazing path that he has followed, the amazing creative mind that he is going to share with all of us today with his insights. So Jamal, welcome. I'm so glad that we were able to do this together.
Thank you. I appreciate it. What's up, everybody?
And Jamal, you look so official with like your whole setup there with the microphone and the headset. I love it. So for all of our scholars, again, just a reminder, if you do have thoughts or questions, we want you to be a part of this conversation today. I'm going to lead us through some conversations up front, and then we're going to open it up and have plenty of time for Q&A. As many of you know, I like to kickstart our conversations by doing a quick round of introductory questions. And today's theme is all around art and social change. And so Patricia and Jamal, I'm not going to take it easy on you. I'm going to ask you some pretty hard questions in this first introductory speed round. And so Patricia, I'm actually going to start with you. I know from reading your bio that you like music and you are an aspiring, you sing, you play instruments. And so I'm curious, if you were to form your own band, who are some of the people that you would want in your band?
Oh, too many. The irony, it was before I ventured into illustration and animation, I actually wanted to be a music producer and create music. But I, at the time, didn't really think there was going to be like a career for it. Or at least I didn't know how to navigate it. So I was like, I always doodle and draw, so I might as well do something that I do almost every day. But in terms of bands, or like members, I'm open to anyone, honestly. Like,
you have to give me one person that if you had that golden invitation, who would you extend it to?
If he was alive, Jimi Hendrix.
Nice. Awesome. Well, that is an amazing pick. I'll just say to any of our scholars who are musicians, feel free to drop your information in the chat box for Patricia to reach out as she thinks about her aspiring music career as well. Separate track to all of her animation and graphic design. Jamal, I'm going to jump to you and ask you another introductory question, which is, if I gave you a giant canvas that was blank, what would you paint? What would you create on that canvas?
Oh my goodness, I wasn't ready. Maybe I would like to paint like all of my kids that came to my class. So like a huge mural of all these beautiful faces of boys and girls and teenagers that came and touched my life and I touched theirs. Like I would love to give back to that. So
That's awesome. Thanks, Jamal. All right, one other question
that's
for
a good
for
idea.
both of you. I know you should do that. My final question for you, for us to get to know you a little bit better. So both of you, if I were to give you a camera and ask you to shoot something around you today that inspires you, what would you take a picture of?
I would take a picture of my bike. It's in my car, but my bike, like I got a bicycle. I ride a lot. So I ride like 3 times a week, and it really helps me decompress, and it really helps clear my head being out in nature and riding. It was raining. It was cloudy. It was crazy. I still was soaking wet. So I love my bike. So that really gives me inspiration to think creatively too. So.
That's awesome. Jamal, I have to ask you this follow-up question because I follow you on social. So I know that on a recent bike ride, you had some followers that joined you on your bike ride. So tell our scholars about that experience.
Yeah, so a couple of young riders spotted me. So I teach like 100 kids a month, maybe more. So if I go out, sometimes I have an amazing connection to so many, and they kind of spotted me and I recorded it. It was just like a beautiful interaction and connection. And I kind of share that all the time. So I think it was really awesome. I was really humbled to have that experience too. So it's amazing.
That's awesome. It was, if you all get a chance to check out Jamal on social, check out the video because it truly is an amazing picture of authentic leadership. You could just see Jamal riding, and then all of a sudden, all these young, aspiring leaders jumping on their bikes and following along with Jamal riding right alongside of him. It was pretty cool to watch. Patricia, if we gave you that camera, what is a picture that you would take that would inspire us? Can you hear us, Patricia? Patricia?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay. If we gave you that camera, what's a picture that you would take?
Sorry.
That's okay. Patricia, what's a picture that you would take to inspire us? Oh,
honestly,
we might be having go ahead.
It's kind of funny. Hello?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm back now. Honestly, oh my God, it's a hard one. I don't know. I wasn't ready for that question, but and I'm currently in North Carolina, and I've loved like when the sun rises and the sun sets and it creates those like beautiful colors. So I would like to photograph it like just in sunrises and sunsets.
Awesome. I love that. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and ask a next question, which for all of our scholars joining, I'm going to share my screen. I've asked Jamal and Patricia in advance of today's session to share some of their art, some of their creativity with us. And this first piece, I'm going to actually ask Jamal to share a little context around why this piece that I'm going to share here, why it and how it speaks to your identity, who you are as a creative. And so I'm going to pull it up for you. And can everybody see that? Awesome.
Okay, awesome. To add a little context to this, I do something called speed art. So speed art is me opening up a screen capturing program and me creating something in Photoshop. And usually you take about an hour or so, and I try to push myself with some images and see what I can come up with at the end. So, you know, as an artist, you're always kind of doing something, and you can kind of get into a repetition of doing the same thing over and over and over again because you're kind of comfortable doing it. So I tried to really dig deep in this one, and I thought to myself, like, if this was my last piece that I was to do, like if I no longer existed on this planet, if this was my last piece, my last testament, what would it be? So I think it was a little heavy because I added some music of just going from a boy to a man. It's a you can see this on my YouTube channel, but it's a quick song, like 2 minutes from the Boys to Men. So this is kind of me as a child and me growing up, and just kind of like, the popularity, me teaching, and a lot of that stuff kind of, you kind of lose some friends and you lose some family members on the way of your transition. And, as you guys move up to different mountain peaks, you're going to be vibrating at different levels. So, and you're not going to vibrate with everybody. So that's kind of like what I was kind of pulling for in that. So, yeah, I was kind of heavy in my emotions at that moment. So.
No, Jamal, I so appreciate you sharing this. I mean, for all of our scholars too, I put the link to the YouTube video that we can share with you afterwards. But I definitely encourage you to take a couple minutes and watch the video and how the picture transforms from the picture on the left to the picture on the right. Jamal, I do want to ask you, because I was particularly struck by, as the picture evolved, the birds, sort of at the top part of where your hat is. Tell us, like, what do those birds mean to you?
I just was opening space. I think the one is kind of, you can't really see between my jawline and me reflecting as a young man. I think I was in elementary school. That's a lion mane. So I had the lion in there too. So I think that was the strongest one. It's just like being the king of the jungle, the lion being tough and trying to, the balance in between that. I think I had, I was kind of going with a Cleveland at first landscape because that's where I'm from, but the galaxy of being open looked more better to me. So this is I forget. It's like this is like a double exposure effect too. So
awesome. Thanks, Jamal.
Thank you.
Patricia, I'm going to turn it over to you and ask you to walk us through how the next couple of slides represent your identity and your story.
Okay.
Oh, Patricia, can you hear us?
Yep, I'm here. I'm sorry about that interruption earlier.
Oh, no problem. You're back. That's what matters.
So I originally wanted to be besides a musician, I was really into graffiti because of where I was living in my earlier life. I come from the South Bronx, so I was surrounded by nothing but graffiti. So I guess subconsciously it kind of like got ingrained in my head, but I never like went out and, tagged walls and stuff. I would do it on paper, and that's just like, I've always admired like the amount of work that goes into the style of graffiti because it's so complex. And even though it's not animated, it always felt like a still animation. So I really aspired to add my style into the things that I was surrounded by.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about this one, Patricia?
So it started off as a commission, but the person ended up at the last minute was like, oh, I don't really need any art. So I was just like, I'm gonna use this, a lot of art that ends up not being used for others. I tend to, experiment and create something of my own from what the original client wants. So that's the inspiration. And the two that are here are just like generally illustrations that I like doing. Like at some point, I still loved graffiti, but I kind of wanted it to transition into like people and objects and animals. So that's kind of where the style developed. I just didn't want to be just a particular type of artist that does a particular type of style. I just wanted to incorporate all the things that inspire me and create something of my own. So especially the one on the right with the face, like I just saw a chunky face and I wanted to do something cool with it. And I don't really think about what I draw, I just kind of do it. So a lot of the drawings that you see, they weren't planned, like pre-planned. I just kind of go with the flow and create whatever I feel at the moment.
Nice. Patricia, I know we have one more, so I want to ask you to walk us through what we see here.
So these are like samples that I put like on my website and Instagram. And again, it was from that transition from the first picture, I kind of applied the stuff that I learned from graffiti and wanted to add it in illustrated stuff and animated stuff, so that, like I said, I always felt like graffiti felt animated, and I actually wanted to see them move. So a lot of these are, especially the pineapple one, at some point I would like to have the inside of the pineapple moving. So yeah, I just like to torture myself with these ideas and, you know, just think outside the box.
Yeah. Patricia, I want to follow up. And so one of the things you said is you don't pre-plan. So you just sort of let your art unfold as is, as it comes to you. And so I'm curious, you know, as a creative, like where do you look for, or where do you get your inspiration for the art?
It's really like spur of the moment. Like, for example, the one with the pineapple, I just so happened to have a pineapple that day. And before I cut it up, I wanted to sketch it because I always thought that pineapples had like a cool shape. So, yeah, like everyday things that normally we don't think about as like, oh, I want to draw this today. My mind just kind of works random like that.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, I want to come back and I want to dig a little bit deeper into that in a little bit. But Jamal, I'm going to jump back to you and I'm going to ask you to share with our scholars. You have been on an interesting journey, going from corporate America into the work that you did at the Boys and Girls Club, and then eventually to the work that you're doing now with creative kids. And so can you sort of take us a little bit on that journey and share with us some of the insights that you've gained through those experiences?
Yeah, so I'm not as young as I look. So when I started out, a lot of the things of what people are doing now, as far as like being an entrepreneur and things like that, being self-taught, was not as practical. So going the normal route would be graduating from college and getting a job in corporate. So I was on that path. And an interesting thing that happened was it was difficult because I didn't have any mentors, and at the time, guys like me and Patricia didn't exist really, that you could really reach out to and connect to easy and really help guide you through a lot of the steps. So, you know, even just taking classes, student loans, a lot of those issues that I was going through was kind of like trial and error. And the difficulty of doing trial and error could easily land you in prison or get you killed. So that's kind of like difficult to navigate through, you know, coming out of the inner city and things like that. So another thing is that the economy tanked. The technology is moving very fast, but at the same time, like I'm learning how to write code. I'm doing animations in Flash. I'm selling stuff on eBay. So I'm steadily moving along. And I kind of got disconnected from really the art and getting a job in corporate. And I kind of lost my way in that. So I talk about it a lot, is that it's difficult to try to be creative on Monday when you not creative all the time. So I would, you know, I was kind of like very disconnected from the work. And I guess like, you know, we talk about inclusion a lot, and I really didn't feel that. I was kind of really isolated because of, and then at the same time, I'm gonna be rambling, but at the same time, technology is moving so fast. So I saw design get commoditized, and it turned into branding guidelines, and they made it into a cookie cutter template, made it easier to do, made it easier to be outsourced to India and things like that. So it's genius for the company. But for us as designers, it was kind of very difficult at the same time because our value was going down, the economy tanks, and then I land myself out of work. So you would think that if you was working for like a Fortune 500 company and you had 10 years of experience, that it should be an easy jump shift to get another job, which it should be. But for some reason, it wasn't in the cards for me. It was very difficult for me to find work. So I'm kind of, you know, and it's very like, it's hard on your psyche. It's hard on your mental state too. So I kind of fell into some depression at the same time. So, it was good. You know, I needed to go through that because I worked a lot on my mindset. So a lot of things like my self-development as part, and still kind of working and still staying the course. Sometimes you got to go through stuff to, you don't know what's on the other side. So you got to kind of go through these difficulties. So to make a long story short, I just volunteered in the inner city of teaching. So I was teaching arts, paintings, and ceramics. I'm completely outside my comfort zone. I don't know anything about any of the stuff. So classroom management, curriculums, all this stuff is just like I'm kind of Googling this stuff along the way. So I got the opportunity to present my idea to teach graphic design because that's my forte. And at the same time, I'm kind of showing the speed art, but it wasn't mine at the moment. So I was like, maybe it'll be more impactful if I show this. So I'm kind of using the speed art as a way to inform it's like an engagement piece to really get them to understand like what's a designer. Because you could just say graphic design, but until you see some speed art, you really understand what that is. And it just grew from there. So I just started vlogging, creating content, photos, photography, just really pushing the social media and pushing the culture really to get people inspired to do what I'm doing. So just trying to practice what I preach at the end of the day.
So Jamal, one of the things that struck me when we first connected was you shared a story about when you were, I think it was the first or maybe the second day when you were working at the Boys and Girls Club, you had your car stolen from one of the kids in the club.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, like, just take us into the mindset around, what did that do to you, and what did it mean to you in terms of the importance of the work that you were doing?
Yeah, it was like extremely difficult because I had my daughter, like I had my fourth daughter at the same time, and she had some difficulties, and she was in the hospital for like 5 months. So, the same day I brought her home, the next day I drove, and they stole my car, and it was like very difficult to deal with because I had to walk. It's like 5 blocks. It's really not the best neighborhood. It's not my neighborhood. So, I just stuck with it. I didn't give up. So I kind of stuck with it, and it kind of really took me to the next level actually, because I got a better car. I got a better situation. So a lot of people said, like, this is before everything. So a lot of people said I would have quit. And I thought about quitting, actually. It crossed my mind like, man, I should just quit. But I didn't. And, a year later, I'm starting off the graphic design program. So it's like, if you quit and give up, you never know what's on the other side. So I wouldn't be on Taco Bell. I would be doing something else. So,
Right.
you gotta stick with it. Like, I've been doing this since I was little. I've been drawing, I've been designing into graffiti and all of that stuff too. So, you gotta stick with the path. I see a lot of people that's, everybody's unique and everybody's super talented. And I see a lot of people kind of giving up and on things that they're super talented about. And I think that's the tragedy, a lot of just throwing in the towel and giving up on something that you're good at. Like, you gotta wait and see it manifest.
Speaking of manifesting the vision and all of the hard work, when you see yourself on the news getting talked about and the work that you're doing in Cleveland through Creative Kids, tell us, like, what goes through your mind when you see these news reports and you see other people now highlighting and spotlighting your work?
Sometimes it's overwhelming. Like, I will be honest. I'm gonna be super transparent. Sometimes I cry. You know what I'm saying? I'm full of gratitude. I'm full of empathy for like other people and this route that's been chosen for me as a leader. And I work around the clock. So I would like to talk about, like, I just figured it out. It was like difficult. It took me 20 years to figure it out, but I did. And what I figured out was that, and this is like, I want everybody to write this down. I'm about to jump into teacher mode. Is that I packaged up my intellect instead of really my designs. So, school teaches you to show off your portfolio, but you got to show off who you are. in your thought process and your philosophy. And if for nothing else, for your family, so they can know where you was coming from. Remember, I talked about that piece in me, like this my last piece. And if I was to leave this earth, what would I want people to know or want people to see me as or think of me as? So that's kind of what it is. And I want everybody to know that too. It's like nobody's perfect. Everybody makes mistakes. You are not your mistakes. You just make adjustments and then you just keep moving and keep pushing. And, you know, you just got to be confident in that. So, yeah, I really appreciate the city. I really appreciate people that celebrate me and things like that. And it's like, it's amazing. It's actually amazing. So
Awesome. We're going to keep celebrating you in a minute. I want to jump to Patricia. And Patricia, I want to celebrate a starting point for you. So when we think about the journey that you have been on, and we see on the screen the strong teams, strong neighborhoods here. Tell us the story behind this.
So this cover was actually the very first cover that was ever published like throughout New York City. And I believe I was a junior transitioning into my senior year when it happened. And high school was like really rough for me because I just had a hard time connecting with my peers because they had like other things on their mind, like typical like teenage stuff. And I was already in high school, like I know what I want to do. And they thought that maybe I was like being over ambitious, and they're just like, you know, be a teenager. And I'm like, no, I love art. So the organization Youth Communications was kind of like my escape and a way for me to feel like I'm a part of something, because I was very like, I'm an introvert, but I was really introverted years ago when I made this cover. So it was kind of like a way for me to not be afraid to show myself through my work. And just like what Jamal touched on earlier about there wasn't a lot of people who were of color who looked like me who were doing the things that I was doing. And I was probably one of the few artists of color at Youth Communications at the time. And then when more of my artwork was appearing in Youth Communications, a lot of other high schoolers who were also not just Black, but Hispanic, they started showing up and telling me like, you know, I wanted to do this because you did it and you didn't let, you know, your adversities with like getting along with peers in high school and, you know, the color of my skin. So it was like I remember that day when they gave me the cover. I actually have the physical, you know, and
Nice.
whenever I'm going through like a really tough day and I feel like I'm not, you know, because I have those moments where I feel like I could be doing so much better and I should be in a much better place. I always look at that cover to remind myself, like, look where you came from and don't ever forget. And I got my first job because of that book cover. And mind you, I was still in high school. And the only other work I was doing was like doing other people's hair and like, you know, like side hustles. So speaking of this panel, but now I was actually doing like art hustle. So this book cover, you know, holds a very special place in my heart because it was, you know, it always reminds me like, don't ever forget where you come from. And, you know, when you were feeling insecure, that's kind of like the advice I want to give to you guys. Like, you're going to have those moments where you feel like you're not good enough, or, you know, because you don't see a lot of people who are just like you, that it's not possible. And, you know, just don't be afraid to just be yourself. Like, just continue to do what you love and don't ever let anybody tell you otherwise. So that's the main message.
No, I mean, I think that's such great advice. And I want to dig into it a little bit more. When you think about you and your art being a pioneer and an example for other people that inspired them to step up to the plate and do the things that they didn't think were possible or see around them. What is it that you think sort of fueled your passion to be that pioneer? You know, and with the Live Más Scholars, we talk about Passioneers, you know, people who are pioneering their way using their passions. And so I'm just curious, like, what fueled you? What kept you going?
Kind of, again, I don't mean to piggyback on you, Jamal, but like it really resonated when you talked about like not having like mentors who come from where you come from. And I was kind of at a point in high school where because of what I was doing, a lot of people were like, hey, I got into what you're doing because you weren't afraid to, like to share your gifts, even though it's not like the most popular thing. So I guess that kind of fueled me to work even harder and really push myself out there, because I was like such an introvert where like it was to the point like I just want people to see my art and not my face. And it got to the point where I got comfortable, even doing this panel or just like talking in front of people. Like I didn't realize how effective it was. And I have a niece who is 14 and she's about to start high school, art high school. And she had told me that she would have never pursued it had she not seen me do what I do. And by the way, the book cover, the year it came out, 2006, was the year my niece was born. So I always tell her, like, I was like, you always remind me, like, my career started like when you were a baby. So and
I love that.
It's kind of cool that now I have family members who were interested in art. Every now and again, they start asking me questions like, oh, how do you get started? So I didn't really think I was like that much of like a big role model or like super popular, but I like the more people that reached out, the more I started taking it serious. And, I'm like, I realized that it wasn't about myself. It was about other people and trying to, to show that it doesn't matter where you come from. If you love something, you just do it.
Yeah. So I'm curious, Patricia, I want to ask you a follow-up question now. With a lot of the work that you're doing, there's this balance between bringing your own creativity and energy to the project, but also balancing it with the clients that you're supporting, right? The clients that you're bringing on in your work. How do you balance that, like, and not lose yourself in the work when you're getting feedback from clients?
It's kind of cool is that, like back then when I started, it was kind of hard to connect with the clients because it was like very like corporate. And the first job that I got was at like a nonprofit, almost like a funding, and it was like these spiffy, like middle-aged white men who knew like nothing about like how I do my art. And they're like, oh yeah, like this groovy graffiti stuff is kind of cool, but we kind of want you to do, they in the beginning they kind of wanted me to do stuff that was not generally my style. But the more I started putting my work out there, because when I started my career, Facebook and YouTube were still relatively new. So a lot of my work was just generally from people that I met face to face. And a lot of the art that I do started resonating with musicians. And so I started getting, going to like certain concerts and stuff. And sometimes I would carry my sketchbook and I'll get like a musician who is like, hey, I need like art for an album, or I need like a poster. And then I started getting those kind of clients. And since I am a musician myself, they didn't feel like clients. They just felt like some friends who just needed some help. And I think when it gets to the point where you have clients who are similar or have similar things in common, it stops feeling like work. So that's kind of like where I am with clients. Like, try to, in the beginning, you're not gonna have the clients that you want, but you guys have the power of social media, and that makes it just easier because the type of audience that are interested in your stuff. And if they say like little things like, hey, I need like a icon picture, you just reach out and do it. And a lot of those clients ended up being really close friends afterwards. And like where I went to birthday parties and weddings, and it's kind of like the cool thing about doing this. Like, you get to make some friends. Like, they're your clients first, but you're gonna really enjoy that.
You're building your sense of community. I love that. Jamal, speaking of building the sense of community and thinking about the relationships that you're building, as you work with young kids in Cleveland through Creative Kids Work, what are some of the things that you think are most important for them to learn as young creatives? What are the things that you really hope through your work that you instill in them?
I would like to get them to just really just create something, keep creating. They consume too much. They like watching the world go by, and they're not contributing at all. So just understanding that they should be having a YouTube channel, that they should be like doing a lot of studying outside of school. I think it's difficult because of school. So after school, everybody wants to be on leisure, but I just want them to instill in them that the urgency of really creating this stuff now. It takes 10 years to be a master at something, 10,000 hours, right? So if you're 12 years old, you could be a master in your craft before you even turn 18. So, I think that they really need to really study extra hard too. Like, so I always talk about a hack. So it's always a hack to speeding up your productivity too. So they if you consume so much, you're not really looking at maybe study hacks to improve your studying, increase your reading, digging in and building some relationships now. Like, you should already be talking to your future employers right now. If you want to be at Disney or Nike or Adidas, you should be sending your grades right now. They should know who you are before you even graduate. So it's like, even if you have like I talk about the burning desire to do something, like, you really should tell your parents, like, look, Mom, look at all these Nike sketches I did. I want to work at Nike. Let's go to Oregon right now and let's knock on some doors. So another problem is, like, the parents really don't know what the kids are into. Like, and you would think that my son, he's 14. He's doing, he plays Fortnite around the clock. He's doing photo montages and videos. He's getting paid from Uber. I mean, not from Uber, but from Fiverr or something. He's got an account. He hasn't told me anything. I found out from another friend. So it's like, you guys really got to tell your parents what you're doing. So what's going on, so we can, help support you. Like, he's playing too much. I'm like, cut this computer off right now, get off of it. And he's flipping out. And I'm like, what are you flipping out about? He's like, I'm making money. I'm like, okay, well, you got to let us know what's going on, if nothing else.
Yeah. I want to play to that point also about your 14-year-old son, but I want to play it a little differently. So the picture you showed us in the beginning sort of showed you as a young boy sort of morphing into who you are today. And so before we open it up for all of our scholars to ask any questions that they have, I'm curious, Jamal, if you were to be looking at your 14-year-old self today, what would you tell your 14-year-old self?
That's a tough one. 14, it was in 84. And now that you say that, I kind of think about that too. So I kind of leave my son alone. Like, I would just tell him, my 14-year-old self, just be patient. That's the thing. Like, I was always in a rush, still am. So I'm just kind of practicing what I preach. The number one thing is just be patient. You're young. You could be all over the place. Like, you know, it's like being self-aware of who you really are. It's okay to jump. All right, I want to do 3D animation, and I'm gonna go over here and go to Photoshop. And I want to do something. It's okay to be that way. It's kind of how you are. Sometimes I'm doing photo shoots. Sometimes I'm doing video. Then I'm not doing video. Now I'm doing a podcast. So it's okay to have that dynamic in you and just be patient and just promote that, show that, create, keep creating. That's the number one thing.
That's awesome. Patricia, what would you tell your, let's say, 18-year-old self?
Oh man. I would tell her, like, don't let setbacks in life deter you from what you want to do, because they end up being like one of your biggest blessings. And the same thing about what Jamal mentioned about being patient. Sometimes it takes a while for things to really progress to the point that in your career where you want to be. And especially, like, don't be afraid. Like, just don't stop being scared when even like good things or good opportunities happen. Just take them all in and accept them and enjoy the ride.
Nice. All right, I'm going to open it up because, again, I'm excited we were able to see the scholars on video for those that are joining on video. So does anybody have any questions for Patricia or Jamal as we move forward? And you can unmute yourself and jump in on the discussion if you want, or you can put them in the chat box, either way.
Don't be shy.
I guess I'll ask a question. So I know you both talked a lot about like mentorship and like, you know, the importance of it. And I'm wondering, like, how does one seek to like ask someone like, hey, like, do you want to be my mentor? Or like, how does that conversation happen? And like, how can I initiate it?
That's it. That's easy. Just DM them and say, I got a question. Can we talk? It's something like think about your top 100. Like, who's your top 100 people that you would love to talk to, meet, and just pick their brain? The thing is, what is beautiful about you guys is that you're young. So if a 14-year-old or 13, how old are you?
20.
Okay, you're 20. So that's beautiful. So it's like, I'm 20 years old. I'm trying to figure this out. Can we talk about something? Like, I just met somebody like just recently. I'm still doing it and I'm 50. So, you know, you just reach out to them and say, can I pick your brain on something? Just do your research first so you kind of know them and you know what you're talking about. Like, I had a meeting with somebody. I made sure that I went through all his website. You know, I went and made sure that I had all the correct questions too. So it's like twofold to it. So make sure that you have some research definitely about it so you know what you're talking about. Not know what you're talking about, but you know, you kind of went through all the questions yourself. So you're not really asking them like basic questions. So you kind of then dug deep in it. And I need these points and you know, what you think about this and can I share my process and share what's going on with me? Like you should be doing that right now. Like you should be researching salaries, companies, culture, all of that stuff, reaching out to them, sending out tons and tons of emails. Like I highly recommend using LinkedIn and getting on LinkedIn. Like I went to a conference one time and I took a gang of kids to a conference and the guy was giving basically like a workshop, right? The workshop was kind of for older students. It wasn't really catered towards 14-year-olds and 15-year-olds. So it was a little difficult, but one thing he said was that don't add nobody that you don't know on LinkedIn. And I highly disregard what he said. You want to add as many people as possible that's in your niche and in your market. So if that's marketing, public relation, education, UI, UX, illustrations, photography, all of that stuff, just add those people, share your work, share your content. Just the one thing that you got to understand, like on LinkedIn, you got impressions. So if you just upload just your resume, you're not really engaging or interacting or posting content, you're not going to get no looks to you. So that's why I said post content, because you're going to get impressions. So the more content, it's like all about adding value, right? So the more you contribute, the more valuable you are, right? So the thing is that what you want to do is you want to bring the market to you, not you applying for jobs, hire me, hire me, hire me, hire me. You want to show so much value that you want the opportunities to come to you and it'll fall in your lap. it's just uncomfortable. Like I used to go to design conferences and didn't know nobody. I'm standing on a wall, and then 2-3 years later, I know everybody. So, you just got to be okay with being uncomfortable, and you'll just get used to it. You almost need to get used to being uncomfortable all the time. So, I'll end it like that.
There's so many great tips in there that you pulled out, Jamal. Thank you. I know Yumi has a question in the chat box for Patricia, which is, what did your animation work look like today? What do you animate for, and what do your animations consist of?
I kind of recently went through like an evolution with animating, because I recently graduated from college last year, again, a BFA in animation. So I was strictly traditional 2D, even on a digital platform, because I used to go to School of Visual Arts years ago, and that was like strongly emphasized. And the issue that I had with the school was that I didn't feel like I was really growing as an artist and an animator. So I eventually dropped out, and years later transferred to University of the Arts, which was like a huge blessing, because the school allowed me to explore different types of animation, like stop motion, 3D, experimental. And that's really how, like, my animation now is not just 2D, it's like a combination of the ones that I just mentioned, like stop motion, even pixelation animation. Like if you use your camera and you do certain movements in certain frames, like I've had a lot of those. And I don't know if you guys seen my demo reel, but at the very end, like the very, very last end of the reel, I kind of did like a pixelation of myself, because I never knew that was considered animation. So going back to the question, I went from just being a 2D animator to a well-versed experimental animator, where I incorporate all the things that I like and put it into my work. And then with music, doing music videos are like one of my favorite things to do, because I don't feel restricted. And especially if it doesn't have lyrics, you can pretty much do whatever you want. So yes, my animation is well-versed and open, and I encourage you guys to experiment as much as possible. Even if you're not an animator, just like illustration, just study different types of illustration, or like even look at art history, take from that and put your own spin to it.
I love that, Patricia. I wanted to celebrate a point for Patricia and Jamal. So something that ties a theme together for me from both of you is that your willingness to just try and experiment, test and learn, put yourself out there through your creativity. And I think sometimes it can feel like we have to be all buttoned up and have something be perfect, right, to be able to deliver it. And what I love about both of you is like, you just constantly create with whatever's inspiring you in the moment, right? Wherever you are, looking at the context around you. And it's through that creation that you not only explore more about who you are, but you also create a sense of community with the people that are following you, whether it's through LinkedIn or social media, et cetera. Like, you give them the opportunity, the invitation into your mind, into the things that you're thinking about and producing. And I just encourage everybody who's listening to this conversation to think about the next time you start to filter yourself, throw the filter away and produce the rawest creation that you can in that moment. And just be open to surprising yourself in whatever it is that you create, right? Instead of putting filter after filter after filter over whatever it is that you're thinking about in the moment. Just do it and see what comes out in terms of your creativity. I want to jump to, so I think Devon had a question, how to access opportunities or the right people as an artist. Goes on to say, I'm 25, I need to pay rent, but all I want to do is create. How do I make that happen? So that's a question we often talk about in terms of how do you balance the safety and what you need in the moment with this creative side of the work? How do you bring those two worlds together so they're not running on parallel tracks?
You got to do both, unfortunately. You got to do both. Sometimes you got to go through it. Like I was talking about the story of my car getting stolen. You know, you got to do both. So when you're off, this is what you're working on. When you got some free time, this is what you're working on. In your commute, you should be looking at or listening to some audio books. A lot of this stuff is really more mindset than really doing something. So it's really understanding what it takes to be a successful person and their practices. So, you know, I talked about your top 100. You should be knowing what they're doing, seeing what they're doing, how they think, what time do we wake up, what is he eating, is he exercising, what is he reading, what's the top books he's reading. You're going to get a lot out of that. So the more you read, maybe you got to cut off any leisure time. So no TV, no sports, no nothing like that. It's just taking in all this information, because I talk about this a lot. I talk about, well, there's this concept called from Earl Nightingale. It's called the well, the spark, and the way. So the well is almost like a well, right? So, you know, the more information you put in it, the deeper your well is. So these are the audiobooks, these are the readings, these are the YouTube information. So the more information you put in, the more chances, the best chances you're gonna have a spark. The spark is the idea. So you like, I got an idea, I'm journaling, I'm doing this, you're gonna get the motivation. So while you working in 9 to 5, paying the bills, you're gonna be working on this other stuff. So you working your day job, but at night you're working on your dream job. So that's the transition that you're getting to too. Another thing is like you could, and then the spark. Well, the spark is executing on that idea. So deep in the well you have on the spark, and then you execute on that idea. So another thing is just to document your process, because there's other people that's frustrated like you too. So you build a community around those people that really resonate with your idea and what you're going through too. And you can have discussions or have maybe a monologue of you talking for an hour on YouTube about these concepts and these ideas and what I'm going through. Next thing you know, something sparks in YouTube, your followers are going up, you're monetizing that content. Now you can take, you know, you can go a little laxico daisy on the job. Also, another thing is maybe go smaller. So maybe get a cheaper phone. Maybe I mean, you know, it's like really going small too. So I could talk forever though.
No, go small to go big. That's what I thought you were going there.
Yeah,
I want
absolutely.
to be mindful of our times. I want to make sure we get to Nicole's question for Patricia, which is, as an introvert, how do you find the confidence to put yourself out there, to network, to build your brand?
I actually have a very interesting story. I'm going to keep it short because of time. But when I was a musician that would go to like open mics, that's really where my introversion was like at its worst. Because if I was like playing with a band or doing a jam session, I would be less nervous because there's other people playing, so the focus is not on me. But I was put in a situation where I had no choice but to not only, play guitar, but I had to sing. And I don't know, I mentally got to a point where I got tired of, worrying about what people, their expectations, whether I was good or bad. And sometimes you have to tell yourself to, say screw it and just go for it. Just like, and the more I was put in those situations, the better I got with, being able to open up. And a similar thing that happened this year, kind of similar to like one of the questions about, looking for work while you're pursuing your art. So a few months ago, Disney had reached out to me on LinkedIn, and I was a little confused because for the show that they wanted me to work on, I was like, the type of stuff that I do, I have like versatility with styles, but I was like, I don't know why they would hire me to do it. So, but eventually after showing my reel and my work, I didn't get the position, but they were like, we want to keep you around. And I was like, I don't know what they're going to do with me. So fast forward about a month and a half ago, this private group I'm a part of for Black animators, production coordinator at Disney was reached out and asked if anybody had any questions about, just like how to look for work and, you know, how to set up your portfolio. And I emailed the person thinking, I was like, I don't know if he's going to get back to me. And, you know, again, that introversion kicked in where I was just like, I want to talk to him, but I'm like kind of scared to talk about like the details of what was happening. And it ended up being like a beautiful blessing because now this guy has turned into my mentor in how to prepare a portfolio. And one of the best advice he gave me, which I'm going to give to you guys, is don't try to make your portfolio look like what you think a studio or a company would want. He's like, it sounds counterintuitive, but he's like, just be yourself. And he's like, I'm already a fan of your work. So he's like, the next reel that you do, don't try to make it one of the shows like DuckTales or Gravity Falls or whatever's out there. He's like, do you, because that's why the recruiter at Disney reached out to you. So my best advice is just be yourself, because it will take you, like, I never thought Disney would ever reach out to me ever. So, and I was not expecting that answer of, you know, keep doing what you're doing, because there is going to be a project out there where they're going to want specifically your work. And I was like I almost cried when I got the email. I was just like, oh my goodness, you know, because, you know, you have to be a certain way in order to get things. And he was just basically saying like, oh, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're at time, but I want to take Jamal's last point and Patricia's last point and give you the Cliff Notes version of today's session, which is, do you create? I think if you take all the things that we talked about today and you literally take a sticky note or a sign and put it up anywhere in your physical space that just says, do you create? Every day, use that as an intention to think about how you are being the most authentic version of yourself and how you are constantly creating to keep evolving into the best version of you and your art form. I can't think honestly, when I think of creators, I feel so honored to know both Patricia and having met you last year at the Live Más Scholar workshop, and Jamal, having followed your work and being so inspired by what you post and the content, the creativity that you put out there and your story. Both of you are such creative and authentic people. And I really, truly appreciate what you do every single day. And it was an honor for us to be able to put a spotlight on that as part of today's session. And not just for all the scholars that are tuning in here, but for all those that are going to tune into the recording and listen afterwards as well. Thank you for sharing just a little bit of your authenticity and your creativity with us. We did post in the chat box all the links to Patricia and Jamal's work. And I know from interacting with both of them that if you reach out, they would totally be willing to answer any follow-up questions or some of the questions that did come through that we didn't get a chance to get to. So please make sure you write down or check out their material online. Thank you so much, everyone, for being a part of today's session. And a big thank you again to Patricia and Jamal for your engagement today as well. Take care, everyone. Bye.